You're too extra in your allyship to the criticism of being performative.
Yeah.
So then people don't know what to do, and then the criticism is you're not doing enough.
Okay, wait.
So,
Is that a phrase? You're too extra?
Yeah, that's. Do you not have TikTok?
Hey there. If you've joined the podcast today, my name is Chris Jarvis. I work with companies on employee giving and volunteering programs.
And my name's Jake McIsaac. I spend a lot of time thinking about public safety and restorative justice.
So we are having conversations here that we've been having for 20 years.
Yeah, the only difference now is we press record and share it with you.
Thanks for joining us. This week on the Disorienting Dilemma, I'm going to talk to Jacob about a presentation I did where I said, as a white guy, just do no harm is actually a pass for me. I get to hand on a fully intact racist system to the next generation. Instead, I need to be a saboteur.
And I invite Chris to ask his black friend, biracial friend, any question he wants, and I'll try to get it at least half right.
And the way that's set up, I'm a little terrified. Let's see what happens. I was in Atlanta last week, and I was giving a presentation at a conference. I have to tell you, it is kind of cool to be back in planes and hotels and just seeing a bunch of people. It's just a sort of a weird...
A little bit of normalcy coming back.
Yeah, kind of a fun dynamic that comes with that that I didn't realize I kind of missed that much because I, do it a lot usually.
Yeah. So what was the presentation?
Well, interestingly, it was on behavioral science and the application of nudge theory to sort of help people notice or follow through on their intentions to do good, either giving or volunteering. But we did get into some interesting conversations about how human beings are wired. And have you
when I think about nudge theory, I'm thinking maybe a commercial application, like something that people figure out, like you want me to buy a car, you figure out how to sell me the car and nudge me in that direction. Like, how do you make nudge theory work the way you, or nudge me toward happiness and wealth? And how do you make it land in terms of the work that you are talking about?
Well, it's been an interesting process because and we are, through the Institute, working with Starbucks and KPMG and a couple others.
Name drop for sponsorship. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if they want, we're not going to say no.
SAP in Germany. So these are large companies and they want to get... here's the thing. If you do a survey at a company and you said, would you like to volunteer or give or make a contribution to improve your community? Normally you're going to get a number back between 70 and 90%.
And these are with employees?
Employees. So a couple 100,000 people around the world said, love to. So then you send out the opportunity and they're like, this looks great. The people who see it say that. 90% of the people will never see these. They just don't notice the communications because... For most people, formally volunteering or giving in the community it's kind of tied to a season or a period in your life. It's not like a part of your lifestyle, like I go bowling or I'm part of the swim team kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so the company sends out a notice and it goes to junk mail? Is that what you mean? Like no one sees this?
No, it comes. But the funnest thing in my day is getting up in the morning and deleting 100 emails that pertain to me, but I don't have to do anything with. And that's the category that this goes into. So
you see it, but you can't get past the subject line. You're not clicking on it. Okay. So I have a buddy, just as a quick aside, who was a elementary school principal.
Yeah.
And he tells this story about, and it's a great story, and maybe I'll butcher it up sometime at another time, but he tells this piece around permission slips, sending permission slips home with a grade 3 student, and the parents saying, I never got it. And at the end of the school year, there are about 400 things crumpled in the bottom of a school bag. To me, ever since, that has become the image of junk mail, That is my 3-year-old, my grade 3 brain being like,
Yeah.
that's not important.
Yeah, that's not important. Why would
Well,
that
this
matter to
hockey
me?
card. This is hockey card's important, but not that. What's that? Anyway, so sorry.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And the reason that is, that's a great example, because 95% of the human brain is designed to be somewhat automated and respond with quickness, efficiency, and just salient cues in the environment, and then just white noise out the rest.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yep.
Because there's too much information. We can't remember it all. We don't know which bits of information we should be able to remember. And then finally, we need to act fast. So we used about 180 cognitive biases to navigate the world each and every day. And 95% of our decisions are based on this. So when we're designing an opportunity to get into the community and do something good, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to how humans actually make decisions.
Sure.
And cue people to say, you said this was important to you because of X, Y, and Z. And there's even ways that you can write emails and whatnot in sort of an F pattern based on how we read emails, and some other cues in there that can really help. And so we were looking to bring those kinds of insights to help companies, support their employees better in giving back, which is what they want to do.
So in the show notes, can we add some stuff around nudge theory and?
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. We actually could do a much deeper dive in it, because some of your work around restorative justice, I think there's some interesting overlap there.
No, we'll do that for sure. Okay, so you're talking to a group. You're in Atlanta. You're talking about nudging them in this direction.
Yeah, and
then what happened?
And at the end, what I wanted to do was, and this is what I wanted to see what you thought of this. At the end, I wanted to help people understand this isn't just about, people are volunteering, our company volunteers 50,000 hours. What if we could volunteer 100,000 hours? Because who knows whether that's good? Was it helpful? Was it actually more of a burden on the nonprofit? You need an output is not a good why statement. You kind of need to go further. And so I said, in the work that we're trying to do, when we get out in the community and we do volunteering, especially with our outgroups, groups that we may not normally interact with, like, say, the homeless population, we're creating space where we can grow, where we can begin to challenge ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world, our role in the world, what we believe to be true about the world, and how we act in the world. I mean, it's this safe space to have some really big considerations about who am I, what's my contribution, that's what this space should be. It's not always, but it can be if you do it in the right way, right?
So you have to make it safe. And so when you're talking about making it safe, is it like a reflective space, like it's safe for me to think about and do some analysis, or is it safe to ask a question, or all of that?
Yeah, all of those kinds of things. So we frame it with a brief on the front end, which talks about why we're doing this. And I think we've talked about this previously in the show, but why this matters in terms of who is the beneficiary? Can I imagine what it would be like to be them? And secondly, what is the significance of this task? So those two things at the front end are key. And then on the back end, we try to encourage, we create this, it's 60 seconds, 90 seconds space. And you definitely remember from Sunday Suppers, we used to do a version of this and just say, what did you experience?
Yeah.
And was it what you expected? And we try and resolve any cognitive dissonance or give them the information where they can do that work. So that's at the event, and that's kind of cool. And so for this audience, I wanted them to remember this isn't just about doing more good or quote unquote making a difference. This is about the kind of internal change, the internal work that we need to do. And then I wanted to give them some context, especially if we think about the internal work we need to do around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so this is the part where I wanted to ask you about. I said, as a 53-year-old white guy, I sit on it. It's not a technical term; it's how I describe it. Sort of nodes of intersectionality. So intersectionality obviously is the multiple aspects of that a person that come together to comprise their identity, and intersectionality is very interested in what are the areas where I may run up against stereotypes, or I can't think of the right word.
Yeah, I mean, these moments of privilege and oppression that are just intersecting, right? They're layering. Okay, yeah. So
right.
You're sitting on this node,
right? So I sit on that node. I'm usually the person dispensing those stereotypes or responding with that kind of oppression. Maybe I don't view it that way, but I'm the type of guy who's doing the hiring, running the department, chief of police, running for office. I typify that person, and all other people with these intersecting aspects of the personality, to which I may respond prejudicially.
Mhm.
They have to deal with me on that node, right? Okay, so
Yep.
that's the, I'm a
So positionally, that matters. Like this
yeah,
is you have the authority, you
yes,
have the
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 trust of the
role,
group.
the trust.
Yep,
Okay, and your perspective generally carries the day. Is that right? Is that what you're
exactly
saying?
that.
Okay. Yep.
So
Okay.
given that, I said the mantra to do no harm for me is horrible.
Mhm.
And here's why. If I sit on that node of power and I no longer speak with microaggressions because I'm aware of that and I'm paying attention to that. And if I follow the new diversity, equity, and inclusion rules rolled out by the company and I add a couple people of visible color, let's say, to my leadership team, and I refrain from certain types of language or hiring practices so that we can be more inclusive and represent better our communities with proper levels of diversity. And I do all of that. And I die and I hand over to the generation behind me a fully intact system within which I found new rules and guidelines so that I didn't do harm. I'm actually keeping the whole thing going. I am
Right.
proactively handing an intact system of oppression to the next generation where they too can behave better. And I said, so the goal of this work, or my obligation, anyways, is not just to not hurt people.
Mhm.
It is
Yeah.
to proactively undo the system that is designed to hurt them and to keep them in a certain, socioeconomic standing, in certain standing before the law and whatnot. So I have to do no harm. For me, it doesn't work. It needs to be, you're called to be a saboteur almost of the system. So that's what I said. And to a mostly white audience.
What was the reaction?
And I think it resonated.
Okay.
And I think it was the first time most people had thought of it, including the Black people in the audience. And that gave me pause. And I thought, you know what I should have done first before articulating a thought that had been going around in my head. I should have had a conversation with Jake. And then that brought me to a very interesting place where I thought, yeah, but why Jake? Right?
Yeah. Why, Jake? We all lean in wanting to hear the answer to this.
So on today's episode, I thought,
well, how about this? Why don't I make it easier then?
oh my God. Yes, thank you.
On today's episode, why don't I invite you to ask me and invite you to this conversation? Like, I think that is not just even though we're trying to maybe be funny here,
Yeah.
what if this is a space where I just actually give you space to ask questions that you may want to know not in an offensive way where like, I've got to ask my Black friend, but actually we're co-laborers in this kind of conversation of
Right.
we're trying to do something. And I think it's what you just said. It's going one step beyond do no harm. This is the difference between you're doing too much or you're too extra in your allyship to the criticism of being performative.
Yeah.
So then people don't know what to do. And then the criticism is you're not doing enough.
Okay, wait.
So,
is that a phrase? You're too extra?
yeah, do you not have TikTok? Did
I
you
do.
say is 50 the cutoff year?
I do, but it's too white. Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
Too
okay.
extra.
I don't
That's
know.
too extra.
That's too
Huh.
extra. You're doing too much. You're just settle down, calm down. You're going too far. Like, we get it. I see you.
What does that
Settle
look like?
down.
Okay. So that's what we're going to do for a few minutes here. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Or the criticism on the other side is that I
okay.
think isn't the self-reflection piece where you're constantly saying, am I doing enough?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
All right. So I can ask you any question Because this is kind of a
Well,
hall pass for questions to your black friend.
well, it can be, and I can give you any answer. It's a hall pass for answers.
Okay, very good, very good. Here's the thing I realized when I was thinking about bringing this up today.
Okay.
I don't know how I see you first, right? Like, do I see you as is it male first, black first, incredibly smart, insightful, contemplative person first? Is it the guy who I go to who knows about restorative approaches and understandings of justice? Like I don't, and then I thought, well, what should it be? So getting past the sort of the
Yeah.
colloquial or the funny meme of white guy asking black guy what he should think.
Yeah.
Your identity to me, I'm not sure how I see you first, and what's, am I being honest with that, and does it matter? Like, do you ever wonder how I perceive you?
Well, I wanted it to be a different question that I could just roast you on, and unfortunately,
I'm pretty sure there's lots of room for
well,
roasting.
let's see. We're still early in the episode.
Okay.
I
No.
I'm just you've got me thinking. Actually, when you asked that, is I don't know how I see myself first, let alone how I'm read by others first. I have a better sense of how I think I'm read by others, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm read by others by race first, right? Like, so if
Huh.
I think that I, in this moment right now, reflecting, don't know how I see myself first. Do I see myself as black or male? I think that shifts a bit in my own head depending on the space I'm in. So if I'm in a space that is predominantly folks who don't look like me, I'm very conscious of what is different. And I feel like in that moment that they are too.
Right.
But I don't know that to be true. And I'm kind of always hyper vigilant for the, for the either the extra moment where someone's just trying to be nice to the black guy in the room, or I think it's like extra or exclusion. Where am I being left out because I'm the black guy
Oh
in the
yeah,
room?
yeah. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but I feel that way. Like sometimes if I'm the only guy in the space, or at least, and I say that realizing that I could also be reading people wrong. I couldn't be misgendering folks by just
Yeah.
looking outwardly. So
Yeah.
I get that. And I want to just sort of say that up front. But there are these moments where I think for me personally, it shifts. Generally, I think they see black first. That's where final answer. I think I'm red color first.
After being a dude.
No, I'm
Black before dude?
yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I feel that way. Yeah,
Black dude
because there's
who
often other dudes in the room.
Yep.
So I don't think that makes it stand out. And I think we're, talking about the brain scanning for quick pieces of information. I think people look in a room and see what's different and automatically start to read that. And at least that's my sense that that's what's happening.
What's interesting for me, because I'm obviously part of the white group, is that when I walk into a room, it is far more about my experience, who I am, the brand I'm a part of. I have never thought about being white in a room unless I'm, I've been to black churches in the past. But even then, it's kind of like, oh, this is what it feels like to be with an all black. Like it's sort of more of a curiosity than a life skill or some sort of,
Right.
yeah. I don't worry about being white. I think will probably miss some things, but it's different than what I think how you reflected yours.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at pictures, walking down the hallway of the one of the buildings at the university I work at,
Yeah.
where they put the graduates, and you can go through sort of by decade, right? And you see all the graduates, and there are some spaces, or particularly faculties. I think about law, and I think about medicine. and if you go down the hallway long enough, you find the one person who kind of sticks out in the picture. And I've often, while walking around, spent a few minutes looking at the photo. I don't know him. I don't know them. It's usually someone who 70, 80 years ago was a bit of a pioneer.
Right.
And I
Like
I
Jackie
see
Robinson kind of
yeah, but
syndrome, right?
it is that. And I see them and I spend a few minutes wondering what it must have been like. I'm in the same space. I'm in the
Yeah.
same hallway. I'm
Yeah.
in the same building. And it must have been really hard to be the first. I
Yeah.
think about that, and I think other people of color have those moments too, where you just see a person over time and space, and you just kind of feel that connection. I wonder what it was like for you.
So what would you prefer then? Like, what is your identity first? Is it because I could have easily, somebody could have said to your friend Jake,
And you'd say, if you ask them, my friend Jake, yeah, the really smart guy who talks about restorative justice, they're not going to say that.
no, you're right. But I don't,
Not that.
so I don't know if you know what's funny here, recording this? I don't even know how to ask this question. Like, there are a series of questions that are so either I've not considered or feel so taboo, like, am I, of course, that's the white meme joke. Am I even allowed to ask this question? Which is why we're doing this
Right.
podcast, is to have weird conversations like this. So, yeah. Okay.
The build up to this question is killing me.
Oh, there's no question behind it. The question is, the question is this,
I was like,
this
what
a fair,
are you going to ask?
is this, no, is this a really weird question to ask about identity? And is even the framing of the question appropriate? Like, which part of my identity is first? I don't know. You tell me. Like, there's no part that's first. It's depends on the context and who I am in the moment and what I'm dealing with. And because it all kind of comes into play to one degree or another. I don't know what the right.
Well, I think context matters a lot, right? So I love you. We've had a long-standing relationship where we've gotten to this place where I feel quite safe about you asking a question for the right reason.
Yeah.
And I would hang in there with you on this conversation because it matters to me that you get it. It matters to your kids that you get it. It matters to future generations. Like, it matters. And so I want to hang in there. I mean, I would warn that any listener just doesn't go out and
Oh my God.
start rattling off these questions to people without context to say, hey, that new person, this is the first black guy we hired at the company. I should go ask them.
We need to put a warning on the title.
Yeah, so it should be like, do not
do this. Yeah.
So that context, I would hope that there are relationships that are safe enough that people cultivate, that they build, that the foundation is mutual care and respect, that it's authentic enough. I think those ingredients will allow for these conversations. And I don't know that you could have them without those.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And so that splinters off into two other questions that I had. One is, if I have, for whatever reason or other, had a fairly insulated life and I don't have much diversity in my group, and this could apply to anybody, black, white, Asian, whatever it is, how can I proactively begin to sort of address some of these things to grow and to maybe, because I'm doing it through dialogue and through conversation with you.
Yeah.
Obviously. But if that's not available to me, how do I go about it? So that's the first question. Second question is, unavoidably, Jake, because of the era that we live in, you have to be sage in this arena for our conversation. You're not going to really say, so Chris, what's it like to be white? You live in that reality and all that it offers on a regular basis. You are not unaware of how those white people go about things, right? But the reverse, we are having this conversation. So you're always in the sort of, Chris, let me tell you, this is not a reciprocal conversation, is it?
Fair enough. Fair. I think that's true. Yeah. That the posture is not at the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. And it's
Okay.
one of the, I mean, besides maybe a skill set or whatnot, let's say I was a tax accountant, you know nothing about it. You would ask me questions, I would dispense my wisdom. That,
Mhm.
but there's something about that, like you have a bit of knowledge that you've studied for and invested in that I want access to. So through our friendship, we get that. This one isn't about, what did you read in a book? This is about who we are as human beings. And the default to, I really need you to speak into it from your perspective, and you already get my perspective. Like I could respond to it. It's not like you're telling me to shut up or anything like that. But that is an interesting dynamic from which the joke comes. I have to go ask my black friend, right?
It is, but so sort of taking it further, I think it does highlight the importance of making sure we pay attention to lived experiences that are different than ours. So it is not just
Oh yeah,
a
that's actually pretty good. Yeah.
knowledge base. It's not just
Hmm.
something you know because you studied it. It's something that you lived and you couldn't possibly have access to it in any other way than ask a person who or to get their perspective. And so
Right.
I think whether that's looking at perspectives of folks who are underrepresented in different gender groups
Yeah.
in a workplace. Um, I think particularly CEOs or other C-suite members would do well to pay attention to the value of lived experiences to shape conversations more generally.
Right.
If you to go back to your very first conversation around nudging, if you really wanted to understand how to nudge me, you would understand who I am. All the
Hmm.
parts that
Hmm.
you would want to, and not just to sell me something, although that's probably one way that it could happen. And we talked about that in the monetizing slavery episode.
Right.
I guess that would be a version of nudge.
Yep.
But if we paid attention more to saying lived experiences matter, right? So experience matters. We're kind of there when we talk about hiring people. We look at education and experience. If we want to test out how a company did, they send out a survey after an interaction saying, tell us about your customer experience,
Right.
because this is an opportunity to either level up, to improve, to fix what didn't go well. It's a great way to check in on how things are landing. And so lived experience matters. How do we make that matter in ways that, how do you get access to that then without asking questions?
Yeah, and as you're sharing that, I thought, that day I was talking at the conference last week, my Tourette's was acting up quite a bit. I mean, it was lots of stuttering, lots of hand gestures, just like normal. And so I had conversations happily with people trying to
Right.
understand that lived experience, and it's not supercharged with the racial issues, obviously, but it did put me in that sage. Like that's not going to be reciprocal either. So great example of lived experiences and lots of different kinds of diversity. And it's okay that there's little reciprocity other than what you may share and I experience and I reflect back to you to say, I see it. Right. Like there is, as I share my learnings and look to unpack it, I do, there is some reciprocity there, I think.
For sure. I mean, I think when you talk about even your experience with Tourette's, there are these moments where we can probably see each other,
And we
right?
should
We can see each other and
let everybody know, Jake, you lived that experience with me. Like,
well, I think we talked about it. I think we
yeah,
talked about it
exactly.
in one of the episodes in the past
We'll
where
put it in the show notes so we can link back. But you were saying, I didn't want people to think that you're like, oh yeah, he's got this thing, and I'm, it's vague and not understood to
no,
me because you
it,
were up front
yeah, well,
for
a
that.
late onset. What,
Yeah, is what happened. Yeah,
how old? 27, 28?
27.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, being around for that was disorienting, probably for the
for everybody
for
involved.
a whole bunch of folks. But over the years, watching other people interact with you, watching other people read you, when and I think we talked about this before, but it is interesting that in those moments it is different. And then I think people are more open to hear about your experience, and they kind of want to ask you, what is it like?
Yeah, I agree.
Right. So I don't think it's
Yeah,
different.
because it's not supercharged. Like somebody walking up, if we were to make this the same kind of thing, they could walk up
Yeah.
and go, Oh man, you do so well with it. I wouldn't even have noticed you were black. You
Yeah.
seem to be able to manage that pretty easily. So you're just not. It's not the same kind of conversation, I guess. But it's
Yeah.
an interesting parallel that I hadn't, for whatever reason, we've been friends for so long. I've never even considered.
Yeah. No, I think, I think we've got these, in terms of allyship, these moments where we make commitments about it, but we then start to figure out, to your point, like, what's the contribution? Like, am I doing enough? The difference between being, saying I'm not racist, and then to your point about sabotaging and deconstructing systems
Yeah.
of white supremacy and power structures, like sabotaging. What does that look like? So how would you want someone to leave your talk? What would you want them to do when they left that
Okay.
talk last
Great
week?
question. Great question. So as this white guy on this node of power over the intersectionality of a lot of
Mhm.
other groups that have to sort of deal with all of the baggage and all of the implicit bias that exists and has been institutionalized in government and systems and culture and a whole lot of things, which a number of people listening may be on the spectrum of belief. Like, yes, that's exactly true too. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's just how we're painting things. I get that, but hold on to that for a second. Doesn't matter where you are. As I definitely am the person who says yes or no in a lot of situations, determining someone's life, and I resist the mantra "do no harm," so I can just live peaceably with this system and pass it on to the next one. Live in peace with a racistly based system just because it was built by people who were overtly racist, because back in the day that was okay. And they just handed that forward. And I got that. So I benefit from it. If I just hand it forward, I keep it going. So sabotaging it for me looks like a couple different things. One, having a public and often embarrassing conversation with my Black friend
Mhm.
and then putting that out there. That's one thing, because I feel like maybe other people will join the conversation or ask their own questions or maybe have a consideration they haven't before. So that's one example. Not everybody's going to start a podcast, and you probably shouldn't. And so moving on. Another thing with our business, we try to work with companies so that they create systems that go into the community and offer not transactional volunteering, like we're going to make the world a better place, which basically means here's how we think the world should work. Let's bend it to our will. And one where you have a transformative experience where you step into the world and you absorb it in a safe space. You're curious. You can imagine what it would be like to be the other person. You're not changing anything. You're just being present to the space. Okay, so that's a second thing. And not everybody's going to start a business like this. So what could people do? Well, in our work with companies, we encourage people to try volunteering. Just
Mhm.
go to an out group somewhere. Just go once, have an experience. Okay,
Mhm.
so that is sabotaging. When you say to the system, I will go and voluntarily benefit my out group,
Right.
you're already unraveling things. The system does
Yeah.
not want that. It will not reward that. It,
It's a
it,
brain
it,
hack.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, the brain, you can trigger some very ancient reward systems to make you feel good about it, because
Mhm.
fundamentally, as Homo sapiens, we're a cooperative,
Yep.
interactive social group. So you're just helping your brain understand this community is not your group. You do not need to fear
Mhm.
them.
Right.
Instead, imagine what it would be like to be them. And that will change your brain and allow you to see the world differently. So if we want to undo the system, we need to do things that the system does not necessarily invite us or reward us to do, like going and volunteering for free with people. And then secondly, we need to, and this is the ultimate system sabotage,
Mhm.
change your brain's wiring. Change
Mhm.
the default setting in your DNA that you're going to give to your next generation. Change the conversations. Change the standards for what's normative. Change the way you address the other and those ideas as always being wrong. Do that for your friends and your family in an incremental way, and forward a little bit of a broken It's not the official perspective. It's not the official way we're supposed to see it. It's not the whitewash history of the United States. I'm handing something where I'm saying, I don't know about this. I'm asking questions here. I behave differently here, and I have a different way of talking about it here. So that internal work, I think, needs to be pervasive in your network, in your community, and then you hand that fragmented version forward. And then hopefully, if you've done it right, the next generation will pick it up and pull at it a little bit more. But we have to have experiences with our out group to trigger that whole thing.
I love the idea of dismantling it over time, because you're right. It has been hardily constructed over time.
Oh,
so it's been
forged.
It's well, and of course, once it's in place, it just gets reinforced.
Right.
And so the dismantling of it ought to be harder, but there's probably a moment. It's like when that wrecking ball hits and there's still some structure to it, and then it hits it again and it goes down. But there's this House of Cards moment when it all collapses.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably another phase of the rebuilding. Okay, now what? So instead of just tear it down, it's, well, what do we imagine could be rebuilt in its place? And I think at the same time we're dismantling, we should be giving equal attention to what are the kinds of conditions required to build something new.
Yep.
So what are the relationships we need to have in place? Because we don't want to create a void that we're not ready for.
Yeah,
we see that
geopolitical.
We see that when we topple governments.
Exactly.
And so we don't want to become a hotbed for some kind of extremism.
And by the way, we should get out of toppling governments. Just
well,
the West.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure it's ever been good, but it's certainly been good for those who topple.
Yep.
It's very rarely good for the rest of us. That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay, that's an episode coming up.
So I'm with you on that. Around dismantling, sabotaging, changing our brain. One question around changing our brain. You said earlier we have about 180 biases.
Yes.
Are they all bad? Like, are biases bad, or are biases required?
Are biases bad, or are biases required? Biases are an unavoidable fact of life. Like, fair. You'll use oxygen to breathe. There's just nothing you can do about it. That's just, and we can surmise from an biological evolutionary perspective why these ones persisted. And other ways of thinking, shortcuts didn't. Like, I should share all my food and I'll eat last. That bias is gone. Like, that was probably never a bias. These are all very much tied to, if you want to stay alive, remember this: a bird in the bush is not worth two in the hand. Okay. Or whatever the saying is that we're going to come up with 1,000 years from now. Birds, bushes, and hands. Pay attention. Next generation. Okay, let's see if we can try this again. So there's this slow accumulation of lived experience that is translated into the defaults of your brain. So lived experience it's a great phrase. Interestingly, these are the universal human lived experiences. So they work out in different cultures and settings. Obviously, if I'm living in a desert versus living in the North Pole, some of those triggers are going to be different, but they are all basically meant to keep you alive because there's too much information. You can't remember it all. You need to make a decision fast, and you wouldn't know which bits of information to draw on for this point, for this decision anyways.
There's a great illustration of that in that Live Wired book by David Eagleman, where he talks about your inability to retain everything, but you need to know something's important in that moment, and you need to know when to forget it. And he says, it's like when you go to the shopping mall, you remember where you parked your car because it's really important that you find your car when you come out, but you don't remember every single place where you parked your car every single time you went to the shopping mall. You just remember the time that you were there. Well, I didn't come up with it. A really brilliant guy named David Eagleman.
Well, we can edit that out. Jacob gave this great example.
Yeah. So the ability, I'm with you, to purge and to know what's important, what to retain. It's really cool way.
And you can use these triggers and set a different context, because nothing means something, objectively. It all means what we think we say it means. So if I'm coming from a place of stereotype, which is, Black people just don't work as hard and they blah, blah, blah.
False.
I'll see something, it'll confirm that stereotype. That is a pervasive stereotype that I even grew up with that one. But if I see the situation and I bring, and I resist that stereotype and I bring different information, like whatever it may be, that's kind of how it works. So the bias in and of itself, great question. Are they bad? No, they're just shortcuts, but we need to do the work of grownups to decide how we want to see the world and not just take the defaults of people who lived on the planet, 100,000 years ago. I don't think they were the most informed people. So I'm not just going to assume all of their shortcuts are completely accurate.
It's interesting about Black people don't work as hard. It's an interesting thread to pull because when folks didn't want to work in their own fields and raise their own kids,
the irony of it is
irony.
It's like a flood as soon as you unpack that right there.
But we can. We'll leave that for another episode.
Yeah. And I hopefully, Jake, we didn't offend anybody in the audience, but I also don't want to sweep things on that is a stereotype that white culture has.
So I should say that this conversation has been spurred on by feedback we did receive from a listener that was helpfully critical, or at least gave us a perspective to consider about you asking me, your Black friend, questions.
Yeah.
And so that is helpful. And it is always helpful when folks reach out and give us perspective on something we've heard, because we don't always get it right. And we want to know more. So there are lots of ways to do that. Leave a comment on the platform where you downloaded this podcast, share it, subscribe, like it, hopefully, if you liked it. This helps us get these conversations out, but it also helps us make these conversations better.
Yep. It's been great. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
This has been a Podstarter production.